Go. Okay. Thanks everyone for jumping on. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome to the webinar. Quick context on today's webinar. The title is Stop Renting Your Own Data Back. The problem is simple. Most banks don't actually own their data. Their core does. Every report, every new AI project, every board question runs through that vendor on their schedule. Regent Bank decided that they were done with that, and today we're going to discuss the story around that process and the relationship between Regent Bank and Identify. So I've got Jason Barr here, SVP and CTO at Regent Bank. He built
Hey,
the
hello, Ron.
Yep. He built the case internally and ran the project. So Jason, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, yeah. And also we've got Lee Easton. He's the president of Identify. We are Regent Bank's implementation partner. We built out the AI data cloud environment with them, and Lee can speak to where Regent owned everything and where we owned everything else. I'm Isaac Burrow, head of marketing here at Identify, and I'll be moderating today. So, Jason, why don't you kick us off? Give us a few minutes on Regent Bank and just what cool things you guys are doing in the space right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thanks for having me. So Regent Bank, we headquartered here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Um, we have been our current CEO and company. They purchased the bank back in 2008, and since then we've been on a wild trajectory and growing ever since. It's been a phenomenal experience. One of our biggest purpose, though, is to show God's love to our employees, clients, as well as our communities, and we really focus on that. And that's who we are, really, in a nutshell. We are faith-based and really focused on community. We're really focused on relationships. And for us in the IT space and in the tech space, creating these tools to better serve the clients is what we live for. So excited to be here again. Thanks again.
Happy to have you, man.
Yeah, welcome. Okay, Lee, as we're kind of getting in, do you want to share a little bit about Identify and just who we are and what we do?
Absolutely. Yes, Lee Easton, also here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This might be our first webinar we've actually had with two companies in Tulsa, which is kind of cool. Jason's just a few miles down the road from me. Identify is a data company. We guide banks to usable and actionable data. We are a Snowflake partner. So a lot of the work that we do involves helping banks unlock their data and move into an enterprise data warehouse so that they can go take action on it and start to leverage it throughout the organization. Happy to be here, and thanks for putting this together, Isaac.
For sure, for sure. Cool. Well, Jason, why don't you kick us off? We wanted to talk about just a little bit about what Regent couldn't do before this engagement, and what kind of was that internal moment? What was the ROI? How did you make the case to your board, and how did you kind of get this project started?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So basically, the kind of our first and biggest problem is reporting challenges. Like most community banks, we run a lot of different vendors. All our data lives in more than one system. So answering anything straightforward usually meant pulling from several different places, stitching that up together, and then anytime a board or management asks different questions, back to the same process again. So what we really wanted to do is combine our data into one place, get a better 360 view of our clients, so we can understand them, help support them on their financial journeys instead of seeing them at kind of one system at a time. Secondly, really is the AI readiness. As we started to developing our internal enterprise AI direction and plan there, it was obvious that like one assistant is only as good as the data that it can reach. And since the data was scattered across various core systems, it was very difficult to put that AI on top of any one data that we don't actually control. And for us, we're all kind of that entrepreneurial drive. So building a solid drive foundation was the first logical step, and really the groundwork we had to lay before the core. Before we could build from the core new initiatives on top of it. That framing really resonated. It got we get the foundation right, and then everything else becomes really possible. As far as the ROI. For us, it wasn't really necessarily a cost line. It was more a foundation of the next several years of reporting analytics and speed there, soft cost, right, to make that better. So that was really the kind of the impetus of what we were trying to solve and the direction we were going with it.
Jason, you guys were proactive in this effort. You were looking into the future. You were trying to maybe even set the bank up for like the next phase and wave of growth. Not all banks are thinking that way. They're in some way reacting to a primary problem, data access. Can you share just a little bit on that same topic around like unifying data to avoid or to mitigate challenges? Can you share, if you mind, maybe your core provider, or if you didn't have challenges there, that's great, but how were you doing things, and like was there a speed or efficiency challenge even in the current ways of doing things?
Yeah, currently, like I said, our core provider, we could get data out of it, but again, it's a very one-sided view, right? You can only see what's happening from that one system, but with multiple systems, like I said a second ago, with that data being in multiple places, it was hard to get a good picture. So one of our biggest challenges was just that, right? Having to go back to each system every single time, pulling our reports, stitch it together, see what the data needed, and then any kind of questions that came out of that, kind of rinse and repeat, right? So it's having that data center, or sorry, the data warehouse, allowing us to pull that data out of it correctly, easily, and repeatably in one go is kind of what we're wanting to do. So moving forward, that's just data is really key. Not only is it key, it's what everything's built on. So having it in one spot that we can access it and use it consistently, it really is going to help streamline a lot of our processes.
Yeah. Yeah, we will see a number of different reporting tools that the core providers offer. They've been, mostly Cognos BI for years, and we can see that banks use them. They make decent reports, but to your point, it's a rinse and repeat process. When we see something that we want to change or adjust, that can add a lot of time delay. So even speed alone, it sounds like you guys are getting some unlocks there.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
That's awesome. So, kind of a question that we had in this dialogue is just there's a lot of data providers out there because you're talking about how you are thinking in the future, you're talking about how you had almost like an acceptable amount of access from your core, but you didn't have that full 360 view. And to accomplish that, you partnered with Identify. But we also, between both companies, we chose a specific data partner, and that was Snowflake. So I would love to hear just with all the data providers out there, and this could go to both you guys, Jason and Lee. Why did we decide on Snowflake for this project?
Yeah, sure, Lee. I'll kick it off on why we kind of chose, and then
Yeah.
you run with it there from your perspective. But for us, we didn't want to be in the business of trying to buy, size, and refresh hardware and trying to guess at future capacity. The cloud kind of separates that storage from compute and scales elastically, and we get to pay for what we use, and it's just a lot easier model from that perspective. Plus the kind of a near zero administration, right? We don't have to have FTEs on site to monitor, and I don't have like a bench of DBAs sitting there ready to work on the platform. We're a small group here, so being able to use a platform that's already built and scalable, it just made the right sense for us.
Yeah, I think I mean we're under the impression that, you know, data centers and servers and hardware are slowly becoming a thing of the past. There's still an industry out there strongly dominating the use case for those things, but for a small organization, which most community banks are operating like a small business, 100, 200, maybe 300 employees, somewhere in that range. Um, Snowflake truly is kind of the perfect glove because it's providing enterprise level provisioning and governance and control and scalability to an organization of a smaller size. The pricing, I feel like Jason mentioned, because it scales based on usage, the pricing also tends to fit pretty well. The smaller the organization, right, it might be a bit of a reach, but the options still are like pretty tough. If you're maybe let's say 15, 20 employees, at that point you might have to get a bit more creative. But for community banks, it seems to be a perfect fit. The alternative there, you've got Fabric, you've got Databricks. Of course, there's ways to do it directly with Azure or AWS using some of their tools. Each one of those can still solve the problem. And so nothing against them, but Snowflake, for whatever reason, they've recognized that early on. And so their job has been really piecing those parts together so that you don't have to have a complex team to go stand this up. You don't have to have a ton of resources. And in our case, as a partner with the bank, they can start to bring on resources one person at a time, two people at a time, and not really have to scale quickly to support an
Yeah.
environment like Snowflake.
Yeah, also it really fit in our existing kind of Microsoft. You mentioned Azure, right? So we're already in that Microsoft Azure footprint. So it really just kind of fit with there too, especially when you get into permissioning, provisioning, permissioning, RBAC, all the rest. It's all kind of native within those platforms. So it was a solid win from that perspective as well.
Yeah, agree.
Awesome. So another question I've got, and I think anybody watching, if we've got a handful of people on the webinar today, um, as you're pushing this out, taking on the project, the lift is always in running the project, the workload that the bank has to do versus the workload that Identify in this case would be taking on. Would love to hear just from both you guys, specifically Jason, but like, what does that workload look like? What does the responsibility load look like? Is this a massive undertaking that just derails every other project? What did that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I think the assumption really for most community banks, not about every, but most community banks, that think this is a year-long IT project, right? That needs all the data engineering and all the teams and all those things we just don't have. But I believe that fear is kind of the reason why we don't start. The cool thing about partnering with Identify and Snowflake was I didn't have to dedicate data engineering team right to this specific project. And I didn't have to build one right now. Identify carried out the implementation build for us. Um, we owned the what and the guardrails of what they were doing and how they were doing it, but they handled the how, which was kind of a lift on our shoulders. So yeah, to your point, it's not without its work, but it was a lot less from the bank's perspective. We just had to worry about the governance and kind of point where we wanted things to go, and they were able to build it out for us. So it was great.
Yeah, so Regent Bank and Jason's team has been really great to work with. I think when Jason and I first started talking, you guys were already dabbling maybe with some Power BI reports, where you're like beginning to look at Power BI and maybe realize like, okay, we this is teasing the organization. We know this is where we want to head. We want to have, more advanced reporting and analytics. Um, so because the organization and the culture of the organization already had a lot of buy-in that made our job pretty easy. So normally that lift sometimes is just around culture and adoption. And that was not the case with Regent Bank, I will say. Um, I will say maybe if there is a lift here to be discussed, kind of back to the theme of renting the data that you own. It is always a challenge getting core data, right? Like that is one thing, whether you're Jack Henry, Fiserv, FIS, or maybe on DCI, IBT, something else. Um, that's always a lift that I think both parties have to really be involved in. Um, and we're pretty upfront with that. And I think our customers, Jason, very aware to that. I will say Jack Henry Bank's things, for whatever reason, seem to go a little bit smoother there. They've got a couple other means of data access. But that really is probably one of the real lifts. Identify on our end, we try to carry as much of that as we possibly can, but we really do need the bank to be participating and on board. And again, that's their relationship that they have with the core. Um, we're going to rely on them for starting off some of that communication, putting us in the email threads or the calls that we need to be on, just so we can go talk to the right people. and get the data out or get to the data that the bank ultimately owns. We still have to go through kind of layers of conversations to get there, and that does become a challenge. It does become a lift. Now, once it's accessed and once it's out, and once we can basically put it in a secure data warehouse for the bank, then it's off to the races, right? Then we go unlock that value.
Awesome. So I'd like to throw another question to you, Jason. Obviously, this was a big undertaking, but something that you guys were already trying to figure out on your own. You brought in the partnership with Identify, and you kind of explained a little bit of what that looked like. But I'd love to hear just like what has been possible. And then as you're thinking, because like you mentioned, you guys are forward thinking 6, 12 months, maybe even further. What are you looking at building now that you have kind of that data infrastructure in place, that Snowflake infrastructure, and a clear relationship with Identify?
Good question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, the biggest change is the data is now something that we can actually use. It's a pretty easy win there. And now that we can use it, it kind of opens the door, right? To AI govern, or we can start doing, governed by AI, report on it. Instead of something, we had to request, we can actually start using it, which is great. Um, we have a kind of a pretty good enterprise AI or appetite for AI here. So how we're moving forward with that is having to build that foundation first. And like I mentioned earlier, you just can't put it's not that easy. It's not that Staples easy button, right? It's you got to make sure your foundation's solid. And once you do that with the warehouse and some of the implementations that we've done, it makes the adding the AI a little bit easier. It's not without its own complexities for sure, as we all know, but it does make that kind of the next steps a little bit easier. So that's another one that between the AI getting ready for that, as well as the data availability, and then another one too is it's kind of a trusted source, right? We now have a trusted source of data instead of scattered extracts here and there, and trying to figure out who did what report on which extract and make sure that that was the most current one, or was that month end or last month end, or so. And now that we have it kind of gives us the freedom to answer our own questions, right? It's the availability to do that. So that's those things have definitely opened up since we made the move for sure.
Got one for you too, kind of on the topic of like what you're unlocking, what you're building, what's next. But um, how do you plan to roll this out to the organization? I know we kind of talked about this, but like, what are your thoughts on which departments or which roles get access to, let's say, the, usability of Claude on this data first, and how long, and how do you know what success looks like?
Who's on first is a good question. I think right now everyone is dying to be on that first base.
Right?
Everyone's ready for it. So I think what we'll do is we're going to focus on kind of the heavy hitting areas that we need some assistance in. That'll just help streamline processes that we already have in place, right? So we'll focus on some of those. Um, I would love to really hone in on all of our processes, make those quick and nimble, and allow our team members to really focus on the more challenging, the one-offs, right? The more confusing or the more in-depth processes they've been working on. And then at some point, we'll start having a little bit more fun and building some cool tools and heading that direction with that. But I think that's the who is going to be an interesting. We'll probably have straws. We'll see who can pick the straw here, and we'll go from there. But yeah, it's going to open up a whole new level of what we can do and how quick we can do it. So it's exciting time for sure.
Has leadership or executive leadership come to you with any use cases or novel requests yet?
It's probably an easier way to say that I have not had one come to me yet. They've all come with something. Some have more somethings than others, which is great. Which is great because that's right. It's hard in the IT world to know that you have a problem to fix in your daily lives because we don't live it. And sometimes it's hard for them to ask for support because they don't know we have the tool set to correct it or help make that better. So opening this door kind of got the juices flowing, if you will, so people can start thinking about, well, I wonder if,
Yeah,
and I love having those conversations because the wonder ifs are usually what turn into a pretty cool tool at the end of the day. So those are always fun.
that's amazing. I got one more for you, then Isaac. We can jump back in here, but um, Jason, if you were to give like one, maybe two keys of advice to any bank that's out there looking at Snowflake or even looking at Azure, or looking at, like reallocating how they use their data from their core into a unified system, like
Hmm.
what tips, pointers, things they're maybe not thinking about, what would you recommend there?
Honestly, I think everyone kind of knows. We already know. We already own the problem, and the data is yours. We're just kind of piecemealing reporting and access to it all. Cloud platform and the right partner. Obviously, we chose you guys. Kind of get you there and control without having a big team, right? To do that. I would say don't wait for a perfect plan. Pick the question you're tired or not being able to answer and build towards that. I would honestly find a solution and or not a solution, but a problem, and knowing that this is the solution for it instead of just building it for building its sake.
Yeah,
I'm a big proponent of having a problem to solve versus buying a tool and finding a solve for it. And so, yeah, that's my big thing. It's, we're a community bank. We scale, we move. It's not a big enterprise and mega project, right? We can kind of scale it back a little bit and focus in on what really matters. So I am of the opinion of finding the problem that this would solve, and that gives you kind of a line in the sand or a north star as you're building this project out to head towards for completion there as well. So you'd have kind of get both with one.
That's
like
all.
it.
I've got one question for you. Because I know I like that a lot of what we've talked about today has been awesome. Obviously, the premise is like stop renting your data, and you've made the point that yes, technically the banks do own their data, but there is a level, especially depending on sophistication of the bank, of like how beholden you are to your core to get what you.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the premise in the title. But what I'd love to hear, because you've mentioned just that you guys have had a lot of wins in the process of cleaning data and then having that data more functional as you've put tools on top of it, like reporting or AI.
Mhm.
Question I'd love to ask is a year, 2 years ago, what did you know was needed, but that data or access to that data was like in a black hole?
I yeah, I think of a super simple one because they all get kind of opt outs. We'll go with something simple. Um, we all have regulation in and around opt outs and what people can and can't. If they subscribe, unsubscribe. Trying to navigate that through a CRM with multiple systems that don't talk to it, we now make that a little simpler because now we can just throw the data in the bucket, and now we have a simple opt-out list that everyone can behold to. So we know who's opting out, who's opting in. That's just a super simple win, right? That's something kind of simple and easy, but
Yeah.
it was a big win for the marketing department because now they actually have a solid list of who's on first and who can they talk to and who can they not and be respectful for those clients' wishes. So that's a super easy win, but that was a challenge that we weren't able to do back then just because it was like I said, every platform had its own opt out and juggling all those was spreadsheet here, spreadsheet there, and
Yeah.
so yeah, that's a kind of a simple but easy win. That was kind of a big one. Yeah, that would be the kind of an easy home run there.
That's a great response because I think a lot of times when we're talking about data, a lot of the default thought is we're just talking about bank data in the core. But you brought
Hmm.
up that you're actually bringing together that unification of your bank data, your CRM data. I'm sure you guys have lots of data points
Hmm.
from marketing to actual sales and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's actually, we hear a lot of different use cases and problems to solve. That's a unique one. That's one that we haven't heard.
Yeah, like I said, it's super simple, and like instead of going just hard in the paint on the bank side,
Yeah.
because we all have the same problems, and trying to solve for those are a constant. But that was just a kind of a simple solve that had a big kind of a big challenge for them every time. So it made that a lot easier.
Beautiful. Well, let's jump to our next segment. We're actually going to grab some Q&A. We've got a handful of questions coming in from the attendees here. So for this first one, let me stop share here. I'll throw this out. Can you guys
Give
see the
us
question on the
give
screen?
us some good ones. I don't see anything yet.
Try this again.
Oh, I have a box I can click on now. Here, I see a few.
Yeah, let me throw these up. So the first one is for Jason. Now that you have this data foundation in place, what has it unlocked and what does that look like for Regent over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think we kind of hit on it a little bit earlier too, right? The next 6 to 12 months for us, we're going to finish the build out here. We're going to continue to add more and more data points into the data warehouse so we can continue to grow that platform out. Obviously, you mentioned that the AI is a big one. So for us, it's going to be building that platform out, moving as fast but as responsibly as we can along the way, because we all know that there's nuances with that as well. But that for us, that's kind of our big thing is we're going to focus on increasing the data warehouse. I'm going to be focused on, excuse me, increasing the data warehouse, deploying the enterprise AI, and then those are the two, and then operationally, getting all those proficiencies along the way there. So
Awesome. Love it. We've got a question. What the question is, why identify? So I mean, just like what was kind of the decision process as you chose us to work with you guys on this project?
yeah, we had a few calls with a few other vendors. The fact that they're in our backyard was a huge win, obviously, just because it was knowing we can just go next door, right, and have a conversation. But Identify brought knowledge. They got the banking knowledge. There was a comfort when we talked to them. It was just a good fit, not only culturally, but they brought the tech stack with them too. So they were a good partner for us to choose.
That's awesome. Question for Lee. How does Identify approach modernizing data without requiring a bank to build a massive internal engineering team?
We are trying to standardize as much as we can. So starting with a technology stack as an example, year, last year, maybe it was 2024, we were basically building the same stuff over and over again. I think we had 5 or 6 banks where it was just same exact thing. There's a product tool out there called Terraform, and we knew that we could start building infrastructure as code. And so we developed Azure and then an AWS focused Terraform instance to deploy our infrastructure. And so, in a way, that covers the modernizing uh, comment there without a massive internal engineering team. So I think that's one, tools and technology have enabled us to scale without a big team. Um, and honestly, I'm very optimistic for what AI and AI tools are going to do. I mean, it's only going to get more efficient. Now that we're developing skills, when a bank, like when Jason's team is moving into Claude, for example, or something of that liking, and they're ready to start maybe moving into a reporting phase for, let's say, their lending officers or lending group, we will have skills that they could deploy right there in their environment that already have a lot of the KPIs and pre-baked knowledge around CDs and ways to view that data, for example, so that non-technical folks in that department can open up their chat interface and immediately start prompting and get the results that they would expect to see. So, um, again, technology is helping us become more efficient in how we help customers, and then technology is helping our customers also be more efficient in how they help their internal customers.
Love that. Got another question for Jason. Uh, What advice would you give another community bank CTO who knows that they have a data problem but isn't sure where to start?
Yeah, I mentioned that just a little bit ago as well. I think it's just go, right? I think the bigger thing for us that I've seen struggle with is that point, right? Of where do I start? How do I start?
Mhm.
I would start with a simple email over to Identify to help with the back end process. But honestly, uh, having the problem already solidified and what you're trying to solve and how the data center, the data warehouse would solve for that. Kind of, I mentioned earlier the North Star and have that be what you're trying to accomplish. So I would come up with one or two accomplishable goals that the warehouse can accomplish for you as you build that out, and you'll get not only the data warehouse, and then you'll start seeing a lot more um, opportunities, right? Kind of show up. Well, now that I have this, I can do that, right? So I think that just get the first couple wins that you need, and then
Yep.
just you're out, you'll be off to the races for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, those quick wins, the sooner we can find those or uncover those, the better you'll get the buy-in from the rest of the organization.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I didn't know we could do that, right? Well, can you do this? And then it's, yeah. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of paint on the wall for people to see the wall, and then yeah, now you're building. So it's been fun.
Awesome. So you kind of laid out in the conversation today that you started with a level of access to your core data, and then obviously we kind of found through the conversation that there's other data sources. So the big project was unifying that data. You mentioned a 360-degree view of that data.
Mhm.
One of the questions that came in is, what does that accomplishment change for you as a technology leader?
For us, it kind of solidifies the decision what we did, and how we did it. Really, being able to proofs in the pudding, right? And now that you can see more than you ever could before, so much easier. And to Lee's point, the minute we get the enterprise AI um, kind of finalized and pushed through, it's going to be even faster, right? And for the bankers to be able to talk to their data in normal query and just normal
Yeah.
language, I think that's going to be a new precedent in how bankers work. So it's going to be it's a huge benefit. But without that foundation, you just can't build. You have a shaky house, and so we want to make sure we did that right.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Okay, the last question here on Q&A is for Lee. Where does Snowflake fit into the architecture stack, and what makes it a good fit for community banks or small credit unions?
Yep, it is the orchestration layer. It sits above your kind of your hyperscaler cloud storage. So you could throw data in a raw, unstructured format basically anywhere, and then pull it into Snowflake for orchestration. So we architecturally we kind of use Snowflake to validate data in many cases, just to determine the quality, the usability of that data set. Like in Jason's case, where the pipelines are intended more so to bring and join data together from multiple sources. But in other cases with some banks, like they have a third-party provider that ships data over files, and half the time they're dropping objects out of those files and not notifying the bank. And so, like, the bank's trying to do some sort of regulatory report on the data, and it's missing, zip codes or specific information on a customer that needs to be in that update, and then it's not there. So, um, architecturally, it is that orchestration layer. It kind of provides the bridge or the conduit, if you want to call it that, between a lot of the inputs and outputs for the bank. Is that layer?
That's awesome. Okay, well, those are all the questions we had for today.
Cool.
Yeah, so kind of wrapping up. So just want to say thank you, Jason, for being here. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to answer questions and hang out with us. And thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again for the invite. It was a
Yeah,
lot of fun. Appreciate it,
yeah,
guys.
excited to see what you guys end up doing, just with everything that you've already accomplished.
Thank you, Isaac, for putting it together.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Just if you guys have any questions, obviously, reach out. We're going to be shooting this email or shooting everybody an email with the link if you guys want to rewatch this or scrub through and check out any specific sections. So thanks so much for everybody attending and hope you guys have a great Thursday.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Take care.